First, let's talk about the most common types of information that you'll encounter in college-level research. When you think of libraries, you probably immediately think about books. However, books aren't always the best resource to use for research. Books are a good place to go when you're looking for in-depth information. Since they're long, there's plenty of space to go into rich detail about a topic. However, it's important to keep in mind publication date when using books. You can find the publication date on the back of the title page or the last part of the book's call number. Self-publishing can also be problematic because it means that virtually anyone can publish a book without it undergoing any sort of editorial process. Self-publishing has grown in popularity so that you can now easily publish an ebook and sell it for a few bucks on Amazon. Typically, you can easily find the credentials of an author to see what sort of authority they have in a given field of study by doing a simple Google search. If your instructor asks you to find scholarly journal articles, you'll need to use a library database. Scholarly journals are written by experts for experts. For this reason, they're typically considered the most authoritative source of information. To be published in a scholarly journal, your article must undergo a process called peer review, where experts in your field approve the article for publication. This process can take a while, so the information in journal articles may be several months to even a year or more old before publication. Despite the fact that they're the most authoritative sources of information, they're not always the most appropriate source. Oftentimes they contain a lot of jargon or technical language. For instance, if you wanted to read a history of barbershop quartets in the US, a scholarly journal wouldn't be the best place to go. A journal article would be much more narrowly focused than a basic overview. For example, an empirical approach to studying intonation tendencies and polyphonic vocal performances would be an example of a journal article topic. If you simply wanted to know the origins of barbershop quartets, this article is much too specific. Magazines and newspapers are often referred to together as periodicals. They may be issued daily, weekly, monthly, or bi-monthly. They're easier to understand than journals, and often more entertaining to read. Information is published more regularly than with books or journals, and there's an editorial process to ensure accuracy. That being said, not all magazines are created equal. Time is a more reputable publication than a tabloid, like the Weekly World News. Also be aware of audience. Some magazines are aimed at teenagers or children. When looking at newspapers and magazines online, be aware of sponsored content, which is usually labeled as such. And finally, websites. They may seem like the easiest source of information to locate, but they can often be the most problematic sources, as anyone can post on the web. There's a wealth of information on the web. Oftentimes it may be the only place you can find information you need, and of course it's easy to search. However, a phenomenon often occurs on the web called information overload. When you're surrounded by so much information, it can be disorienting. The key to overcoming information overload is strong search skills and critical evaluation of your sources.